ladies and gentlemen, coming to the stage, Chenault.
I come from a long line of mothers who love hard and don't have patience for a lot of nonsense. Ever since I was a little kid, my mother and my Aunt Betty would tell us kids the story of our great-grandmother, their grandmother. Her name was Bertha, Virginia, and she lived in Coffeyville. Everybody called her Buff. Buff married a man named Austin Riddick. And they had children, and one day when she had decided that he hit her and her kids for the last time, she got her shotgun, and she invited him to leave their house. He accepted her invitation. Buff went on to raise her 4 daughters and 1 son with the help of other mothers. Eventually, in the early 1920s, all but one of her children moved north, with a whole lot of black folks that were moving up north. She and her youngest, Hortense, stayed in Coffeyville. But eventually they did follow her other 4 children north to Pontiac, and they set about trying to build a life for themselves. Well, Buff first rented and then bought her own house. A couple of years later, Austin Riddick showed up demanding money. It seems that he had lost all of his money in the stock market. Buff and her children told him no, and told him to get back on the train and go back to Coffeyville. Well, he raised such a fuss that he ended up in jail for 30 days for disturbing the peace and some other things. As soon as he got out of jail, he went straight back to her house, 146 Jackson Street in Pontiac. Only this time, he got himself an axe and he went in swinging. The only people in the house were women and children, 2 baby girls, 18 months and 3 years old. My mother and Aunt Betty always said that Hortense was out of town. But the newspaper article that I found years later said she was in that house. Austin Riddick bludgeoned everybody he could get his hands on in that house with the flat end of that axe. But the funny thing is, the police found him dead in the backyard with his throat slit. Everybody else was fine. They were injured, but they lived. My great-grandmother Buff and her daughters, Maribel and Hortense, raised those girls in that house. And when people asked her, why would you stay here after such a terrible event happened in your house? And she said, I've cleaned too many white folks' toilets to let some crazy nigga run me out of my house. Those little girls grew up to be my mother's first cousins, my aunts Vivian and Phyllis, and they led exceptional lives. They were interesting, strong women. So, I gotta tell you, I'm not anybody's mama. I've never been married, and most of the time I don't have any regrets about that. I have done what and whom I pleased, when I pleased. Is it any wonder then that I did not follow my college boyfriend, the love of my life, to Ohio to start a family with him? I loved him, he loved me, he was a good person, but I wanted to go to a top 5 law school, and wasn't no top 5 law school in Ohio, so I had to move on. I was heartbroken. Then he married a very nice woman and seems happy. We're still friends, we still talk. The summer after we broke up, I went to California to go to school just for the summer. I was in Los Angeles, and I met a handsome man by the side of a pool at a party. He was wonderful, he was smart, he was kind, he was the love of my life. But he wouldn't follow me back to Michigan for law school, so I had to move on. And once again, I was really sad. And I called my mother and I said, should I have done this? Was this the right thing? And she said, yes, you're really too young anyway. You've always wanted to go to law school. You do what you've been doing. I went to grad school first. And one day, a very handsome man introduced himself to me on State Street. He was athletic and smart and strong, and I loved him. He was the love of my life. But he had difficulty finding his way professionally after he graduated, and he tried to take some shortcuts. And there were a few other women that really loved him too. So he moved on, he married a very nice woman, and they have 2 daughters. One of them is named after me. And we're still friends. I still care about him a great deal. But I had to move on. When my law school boyfriend and I were close to graduation, I thought this could be it. I could end up married with kids. You know, I kind of wanted kids. I was taking it pretty seriously at that time. We were on the same path at the same time, and I thought this could be it. But we had some problems, and he stayed to get another degree, and I moved to Chicago to wait for him because we both wanted to live in Chicago. And when he graduated, we took his trip to Jamaica thinking that we could fix things. We broke up. And I called my mother crying. And I asked her, did I do the right thing? And she said, yes, you did the right thing. I know what the problems were, and you did the right thing. And he went on to marry a woman that I did not like at all. I knew her through sports. We both ran track, and she cheated frequently. I told him not to marry her. He did, and after the divorce, I tried to be supportive. They had a gang of kids. He'd always wanted kids, but he was no longer married. He's doing very well for himself, and my mother still asks me about him. He's doing well, and we both know, my mother and I, that I did the right thing, given what I knew at the time. Well, I stayed in Chicago because I was a hot mama, and I was having fun. There were bulls, there were bears, there were lawyers and salesmen, and I was having fun. I had good friends. We threw great parties. But I ended up dating a guy that I didn't like all that much, but I saw potential in him. I found out that he had a longtime girlfriend who he described as sweet and petite. And I found out that she was light-skinned and she came from money. And he said he would never do anything to hurt her, but could we just kind of keep on the... And I said no, for a number of reasons, one of which was he had a teeny tiny penis with which he was only vaguely familiar. If you're gonna have a little penis, you need to know what to do with it to inspire me to like it. He was not inspirational, nor was his penis, so I moved on. And this time I called my mother crying, not because of him, but because I was starting to see a pattern. They wanted nice, they wanted sweet, they wanted petite. A lot of them wanted light, and I wasn't none of those things. I was nice enough. I was smart. I was fun. I was a lot of fun. And so I was sad because I wondered, what is going on? What is wrong with me? And I called my mother, and she said, there is nothing wrong with you. You keep doing the things that you enjoy. You do what you're supposed to do, and this will work itself out. And I told my mother, I said, no, you know what? No man nowhere woke up this morning and said, you know what? Today's the day. I'm going to go out and find me a big old broad-shouldered, sharp-tongued, potty-mouthed woman with size 9 hands and size 11 feet. That's what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna marry her. Nobody says that. And my mother reminded me that she'd been married to my father for a very long time, and he loved her. That my aunts had married men who loved them and didn't mind their strength and didn't mind their independence. They loved them. So I blew my nose and I moved on. When I turned 30, my friends threw me a wonderful birthday party, and I danced my ass off. I was back in Detroit by then, and I really wasn't pressed about getting married or having babies or any of that. And I had concluded that I didn't have to do both. I could have babies without being married. My mother was on board with that, too. My father was kind of okay with it, but my mother was fine with it, because she knew my plight. Well, by then I was back in Detroit, and I started doing dumb shit. I got involved with a married man. He said he was unhappy, he was going to leave his wife, all that stuff. And I believed him. And for the first time, I couldn't talk to my mother about my relationship because I was ashamed. It got to the point where I could not look at myself in the mirror because I was so ashamed of myself. And so I tried to end it, was not successful, just couldn't be strong enough. And finally, I talked to my mother, and she said what I thought she would say, end it immediately. And she also said that she was very disappointed in me. I'd rather she'd hit me. Eventually, I did end it for good, and I moved on. But again, I was wondering, when is this going to happen for me? When am I going to get what I really want? See, I wanted to have children to give them at least what my parents gave me. A nice home, a good education, lots of interests and activities. My parents threw a whole lot of stuff at the wall to see what would stick. And some of it did. And I wanted to pass this along to my children with the right man working with me. And it just hadn't happened. Eventually, I decided I was going to move to New York and become a full-time actor and writer. I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore. I tried a lot of cases. I was developing a pretty good reputation as a good defense attorney. I had a wonderful wardrobe. I had beautiful shoes. Look at these shoes. I loved my shoes. But I moved to New York because I thought that's the place to go for acting, and there are 8 million people there. So surely somebody will be looking for somebody like me, or will at least not see me coming, and will fall prey to me. So I moved to New York, and I thought I would start dating a lot immediately, but of those 8 million people, a lot of them are crazy. I mean, really crazy. And so I was scared. I wanted to see proof of identity, clean bill of health. I wanted to check their ankles to see if there was a tether. I was scared. Well, eventually, I had to move back to Michigan because my father was sick and my mother was his sole caretaker, and it was too much. So I came back, and by then, I was in my, I'd say, no, you know what? I was in my 50s by then. And I still thought that I had plenty of time to have babies because my mother had her last child when she was 40, and her mother back in the 30s had her last 2 kids when she was in her 40s, and my Aunt Shirley had her only child when she was 40, so I had all the time in the world. And I was talking to my friend Audrey one day because she was complaining about not meeting anybody, we getting old. I told her, no, we ain't old, we can still have babies. Audrey's an OBGYN. And Audrey said, fool, our eggs have morphed so much that at this point, we could have puppies or kittens or something. You don't get new eggs. I thought we got new eggs every month. We didn't get new eggs every month. And I was crushed. I cried. I was a mess because I thought I've squandered all my good eggs on some bullshit. And now, it might be too late. I don't know. It seems like I still could, but I don't know. So I was getting a little bit concerned. But my mother told me, don't you worry. Don't worry. You'll be fine. Well, by then I had learned that you got to make your own family sometimes. And I ain't nobody's mama, and I've never been married. But there were people who kind of adopted me, or whom I adopted. When Kenneth's mother died suddenly, I held him when he cried. And I told him that everything was going to be okay. When some fool outed him by hacking into his email account, I held Kenneth again, and I helped him to undo the damage that was done and get himself together and be proud of who he was. Then when his father died even more suddenly, I held Kenneth again. Kenneth is my child. Why? I didn't birth him, but he is my child. Rafiki adopted me because she said I look like her mama and I cuss like her daddy. When Julia was upset because she thought she was going to flunk out of med school, I told her that I loved her and that I was proud of her no matter what, med school or no. She was fine. She is my child. And when we thought I had a stroke, Rafiki kept me on one phone and called for help on the other. Julia would not leave my bedside until I told her she had to go home, she had to change clothes and eat. So I ain't nobody's mama. I've never been married, but I have children that I love, and they will always be in my heart. Well, by the time I moved back and my dad was sick, I'd kind of given up. And they're in Lansing, so you know the pool is kind of, it's kind of dry. I see every day unconditional love and commitment when my mother takes care of my father. He doesn't know what day it is. He can't use the phone. He doesn't know how to turn on the TV. This man was a college professor. But my mother has taught me to never cry in front of him. He will never feel like a burden. And we will treat him like he is a valuable, contributing member of our household. You see, I am my mother's daughter, and she is her mother's daughter, and her grandmother's granddaughter. And I take pride in all of those women. I'm sorry for anything that I've done to shame them when I was stupid, but I'm still a hot mama. A few weeks ago, I was at a Prince party dancing on top of the table with some guy who was real cute and my friend Donna McKay. So I am holding out for what I really want. A man who will run alongside me, and when we can't run anymore, he'll walk alongside me. And if I want to dance on the table and can't get up there by myself, he will help me get up on that table and I will dance my ass off. Thank you.
Chenault, hot mama.